Okay guys, so this particular video is just to clarify a couple of points. I think for those of you who may know me, you might follow me on TradingView. You might actually be a member or part of our Discord server. I think the assumption is that, I'm just a grizzly bear, that this is ultimately negative, negative, negative. I think I just want to clarify that I've been bullish on Bitcoin since 2011. I'm actually a VC investor, so we have some investments in some crypto-based companies as well. And the longs and shorts of it is, like I said, I've been in there since 2011, and I've also been a forex trader for the last 21 years. So I ultimately know that things have to come down sometimes, a little bit of a breather. I've written some articles on buying the dip and this, that, and the other. So I just want to clarify my situation overall is ultimately bullish crypto, bullish Bitcoin. But I also know that some markets need to just readjust, reevaluate, kind of just take the rest, take the breather, kind of go again. So in my last video that I posted on YouTube, I'll actually put a link up now in the top side for this particular video. I actually covered a couple of different methodologies, I guess, and logic for both bullish and bearish nature. And what I'm actually looking for personally is confirmation, kind of one way or the other. Now, you could argue that confirmation is a move of $10,000, $15,000. In the grand scheme of things, that's not really much, and I think a lot of this move has actually been fueled by hype. I think if we look at this particular candle, some people will say, "Oh, you could, catch the bottom." Well, if you caught the bottom, what would have been the difference is buying the first move there and getting obviously stop back out on the way back down. So, as a professional trader, I'm looking for the confirmation rather than just gambling in terms of I think Bitcoin to the moon. So, ultimately, what I want to do is I'm just going to clarify in terms of some of this to start with. I'm just going to show you in terms of the first part on this particular post going back to the 18th of March. The expectations on this particular move was as part of a four move down. I was liking to see an A back up to B. Now, on the B, I'd actually put an 8-hour block here, liquidity block. Probably should have used the daily because I know we had a slight extension above and beyond this, which ultimately then readjusted the C, the D, and ultimately giving me E the same level as what I was aiming for. I would have liked to have seen a little bit deeper, if I'm honest. I would have liked to have seen the lower side of this. But the longs and shorts of it was from the 18th of March, the target zone was as follows. So I'll just play this idea through and then come back. You can actually see what we were aiming for was this particular move. So A to the pip, B ultimately a little overshoot. Now that could have even been fueled by hype, but I'm guessing if I'd measured, like I said, the 24 hours rather than the 8 hour, then I think we would have adjusted this a little bit higher. C come down and then back up for the D being almost the equivalent of the difference in the height, and then back down to E to finish off. Now, where I am at the moment and my assumption on this is not just to do with this one. It's actually more to do with the current Elliott situation. And this post you'll see takes me back all the way to the 26th of March this year. And as you can see, I do believe that we're in this much bigger 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 move on the monthly. But I think where I was posting this and expecting this kind of pullback, the 3 on the weekly is the assumption as to where we were at this particular point of the post. So I'd actually marked this up on the weekly high 3 coming down for a 4. I had a shallow, which I'll show you on the chart. So I had a shallow and a deep pullback range, and then ultimately moving in and out of this range. Now, the reason, although we've sat in this range, and I'll just come over to show you this on the chart. So, although we've sat in this range for some time, and we could even argue that we've now left the range, I'm just looking for that extra little bit of confirmation to make it kind of valid in terms. So this was the weekly forecast. This is ultimately going back to March, as I've just shown. And you can actually see that although we are now technically out of the shallow, we're not actually confirmed yet. And if I am using Elliott as the bias, I'm going to expect some kind of pullback anyway. Then it's a question of measuring that pullback and taking it long should this bias now be complete. and validated with my confirmation. So, just to confirm, I am bullish overall. I just know from a bearish perspective that we need to have a little bit of respect to the price action, and I'm sitting comfortably waiting for my entry in this particular move, not stressing about not catching the bottom. That, like I said, is just a mugs game really. And if you're willing to do it, happy to do it. Yes, you might make 10%, 20%, 30% on one trade, but the reality is that's not sustainable. And a trader of 21 years, I ultimately know, and I'm excited for the much bigger picture rather than some short-term gains in a move like this. So just jumping into some logic now, as we started to approach the top, and there was more this level here, I was actually looking at some secondary tools, things like the BlockFi Reserve. And what you'll see on this particular chart is as the price come up to what I would regard as the buyer's climax, we've actually seen this real sharp drop off in terms of the reserve. Right now, we've come down and we're practically sitting down at the bottom here in this at the moment. And although I haven't paid much attention to this in recent weeks, the real value and the telltale sign was on this sharp drop from, like I said, the buyer's climax in essence. So when I start looking and analyzing this in terms of the current bias, the first thing I like to do is to stick some Weis wave indicators on, and I just go looking for the three, right? So clear as day, this is ultimately the three. This gave me the run up, and we then literally had a little bit of a run from the top here up, which was ultimately retail buy-in and composite man selling. Okay, now I'm going to work back and I'm going to say, well, clear as day, that paints for me a nice 2, and obviously this gives the 1. Okay, now from this particular perspective, I don't really care what goes on before that. I'm seeing this move on. This is currently the weekly time frame. We see in the 3. Now, if we're in this assumption that this is still a 4 move, and let's assume that 4 finished here at this particular point, okay? Now, what we're going to see in this is we've had massive bearish momentum here. And okay, not much effect, in terms of where we are on the west side. But that's not enough to give me my confirmation to take this to the upside. We then look at the volume side of it, right? So I'll stick the volume on instead of this. Just keep this in mind. What I'll do is I'll stick the volume on next. I'm just going to put in some regular volume on this one just to show. Now, when we look at the actual spikes and the moves, what I've just drawn from this particular point, we've got volume, which is actually descending. Okay, so the issue for me on that is we've got this move up with decline in volume as the move up is actually happening. So therefore, I don't see this justifiable as a full out institutional move up. This is low volume, which means we're going to have it pretty easy in terms of moving the market ultimately. We've got a lot of perma bulls sitting in this space. And I think the problem being is that when everybody jumps on the same bandwagon, the price is going to move when there's a lack of, I'm not going to say interest because I think that's unfair. I think there is interest in the institutional side, but I don't think the entries are there as we stand right now. I think there's still a bit more accumulating to go on. I think these guys will want to take this price obviously a lot higher, and I feel at the moment that given where we are in terms of the current situation from a retail perspective, I think that there's a lot of retail hype interest, ultimately greed, and therefore fueling this up to a decent level, i.e. the 50k. We've seen that this is now support turned resistance, and therefore I feel that 50k is going to suck it in obviously a lot more positions, and therefore a bit more of a drastic drop wouldn't actually surprise me in terms of the current circumstance and situation. Okay, so like I said, for me, I am bullish as a whole. I do feel that we are going to go up at some point. I just don't feel that this is the be all and end all and to the moon we go based on this particular swing. Okay. Now, the next couple of things is that on the zigzag levels, just covering what I've covered with the Weis waves themselves, if we were to make the assumption that from the 1-2 move we had, we've got a clear 0 sitting there, we've got a 1 sitting here, we've had an A, a B, and a C, so I'm just going to mark those in. So we've got an A sitting there, we have a B sitting here, and we have a C, which gives us basically the 1 and down for a 2 move. This gives us the 3 move, which is as clear as day, and therefore in this move down, what you'd actually be expecting is an A, B, C at least. And therefore I'm seeing an A, currently a B, which makes me feel we're due to see the actual C leg down of this particular move. Okay. Now, this is probably a little bit clearer to see if I was to go into the monthly move. Now, what you're seeing on the monthly, right, if you zoom right in, what you're actually seeing on the monthly is no pullback on that way down, which means that's clearly the 0 to A. Going back up to the B, which gives me this on the monthly, we've got the A sitting here, and we've got the B sitting there. Okay, so that's one thing. There's a lot of info, I guess, available on both sides, and I'm kind of happy to listen to, bullish bias. And like I said, I keep just reiterating that I'm bullish as a whole. I think I'm just fearful for many newer traders who are jumping on this thinking, this is going to go to $250,000 without any kind of pullback. And as Composite Man would be looking at this, and ultimately, if you don't understand Composite Man, it's something that we teach within the Discord server. It's all to do with Wyckoff logic and Wyckoff schematics. And the longs and shorts of it is it's basically the big banks, the institutionals, the money men, basically making their profits from retail traders. So we have retail sentiment to the bullish side. We've got extreme fear in some of these indicators. We've actually got, Moon Boys calling this to 250 grand. And I think the reality is it's kind of primed and ready for another leg down before the decent move up. So, my bias is I want to take this long. I'm just looking for that confirmation. Okay, so on the monthly time frame, this is what I'm also seeing. This is where we are at the moment. And one of the things that I saw this morning, actually, somebody in our visitors section had actually posted a YouTube video where the guy had actually put this particular image or something similar to this image up on the screen. Now, when you look at where we are in the current charts, we clearly had from the public section here into the greed and the delusional kind of phase. You could actually say the new paradigm there was at 64,500, wherever we got to. We've clearly had the drop down, which this is marked up as the bull trap, which has then taken us to the return to normal in terms of what retail traders are likely to see. So again, this is just a little bit of extra fuel for why I think we've got a little bit more bearish momentum to come. I don't think it's going to drop down all the way down to this despair kind of phase, but I would like to see even just a small liquidity grab just underneath these levels here. We might not get there. I'm not saying this is the case. I just feel that it's worth mentioning given where we are, in terms of the current situation. So, that's where I am at the moment. That's where my head is at right now. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to take this forward into the bullish side of things. Okay, so I'm going to look at some bullish scenarios, and I know I've covered this in the video. I'll try to pop this up again. I'm still learning the YouTube side of things, so I'll try to pop up the bullish side of it in terms of the forecast, and therefore I'll put some chapters in, for you guys to jump forward if you just want to see the bullish analysis. So on the bullish side, the one thing for me that I'm looking at is to start with, I'm going to stick on the stochastic just to give you a feel for where we're at. So on the weekly stochastic, the first thing for me that is slightly concerning is this. We're currently in the overbought territory, and therefore a drop down, could be on the cards kind of regardless. Now, let's assume that I don't really care too much about what's happened before. I'm going to take my bias on the bullish side right now and just assume this is going to go, to the moon. We're going to get a 250 grand. I'm going to enter it 50k, and therefore plenty of space to the upside, nothing to stress about. My stop loss is going to be at, 29k, and life's good. So in essence, if we were to take this as our current zero, this being our one, down for a two and up for a three, well, clear as day, we're going to get a four and a five move up. Okay, so I'm just going to mark that up just a bit cleaner. What we're actually suggesting is we've got a 0 to 1, back to 2, up for 3, down for 4, and then ultimately up to 5. Now, in a much bigger picture, if this actually was the case, we would actually only be seeing this as the 1 on a bigger time frame before getting a deeper 2. Okay, now the other thing you have to take into consideration is on that bigger time frame, if we assume that this being the leg 1 up from our current move away from the 4 weekly up to 5, then in theory there's nothing stopping us coming all the way back down 99% of this move before taking that long. Okay, so what I'm actually looking for on the personal side, bullish or bearish right now, the reality is I'm looking for a couple of things. I'm looking for character traits here. So as the price comes back down, what's the stochastic telling me? What's the kind of sentiment like? What's in the news? What's the retail sentiment like overall? And I'm quite happy to even sit this move out and actually wait on this bigger pullback here before going again, because it's this particular point will give me a much better entry. I might take some of this depending on the time frame, but the reality is the confirmation is kind of key for me, and therefore knowing that we're going to have a 0 to 1 move on that time frame, we're also going to get the 1 to 2 pullback on that much bigger time frame. So that's kind of step one. Now, although this is ultimately bullish, I've got to try to find some logic to, like I said, give me confirmation as to why I would like to take this to the bullish side. And, just following other people isn't really what I'm aiming for. I don't want to be one of the sheep. Sheep tend to get slaughtered. And therefore, I'm kind of looking at this thinking, how can I justify to myself that this actually is, bullish bias? The volume is declining. The ABC move looks very compelling on a monthly, and I've just got to try to, I suppose, differentiate the difference between where I am and what I'm actually seeing on the charts right now. So if I'm going to come down to the daily time frame, let me just see if I can find any logic in this particular move. So on the daily time frame, what I'm currently looking at is if we again go in and assume that this was my current 0 level, up for a 1, back down for a 2, right? And then ultimately up for a 3. Now, the problem I have, and I've covered this again in the similar video I was talking about earlier, again, I'll try to post this if I can. So, same video, but I'll just post it in different timestamps. So, for me, what you're aiming to see within a 0 to 1 move is actually a 5 leg up. And I can't see that. I can see a 0 back down, potentially A to B, up for a C. Now, in the move from 1 to 2, you can't really have a 5-wave corrective move without something else coming into play. So some kind of double type or combo type move overall. And what I'm actually seeing in this one is, even if we say here, 1, 2 move, we got to come down again to the next low and back up, which means we've got a 5-wave move sitting in this. So 0 to 1 I can't justify, 1 to 2 I'm struggling to justify. So let's just say that, okay, I'm happy with this and I'm not. Let's just assume that I was, and I just move on to the next step. Now what I'm looking at is a 0 to 1 move. I'm looking at the 1 to 2 pullback, and now I'm looking at the 3 before giving me a 4. Okay, so now I've got to look at a couple of things. Well, at the moment, unless this makes a real big spike, we currently would have the 3 wave being a bit smaller in terms of the size than actually the 0 to 1 wave, and already the 4 to 5 move. So I'm really struggling on this in terms of the move up. I'm not going to rule it out altogether. I do like the idea of being long Bitcoin sooner rather than later, but I'm just not willing to jump in and gamble this without any justification and confirmation. So, again, I hope this one helps, and just clarify kind of my position, our position in terms of Mayfair. Why are we not too stressed about this particular move up? Yes, it's been a big one, but the volume doesn't really say that that's exciting or interesting. So, yeah, happy to sit on my hands for a little bit longer, and then let's see where we get. So, have a great week, and we'll be seeing you in the next video.